everyone, and welcome to Your Move HR. I'm your host, Stacey Harris. If you're an organization that is struggling to hire, it might not be all the Great Resignation's fault. I know we like to blame it. There's a strong chance that you're overlooking a really big untapped talent pool. In this episode, we're calling out a massive blind spot and a missed opportunity in just raw available talent because if we want our businesses to do more than just survive right now, we need to hire engaged high performers from diverse candidate pools with unique skill sets and the ability to grow within an organization. These are people that are in high demand everywhere. Fortunately, we have someone who's going to help us tip the scales in your favor. Joining me today is the co-founder and chief operations officer at Utmost, the former senior vice president of platform technology at Workday, who led product management and product strategy as Workday grew from a $15 million company to a $2 billion industry leader. Welcome to the show, Dan Beck.
Great to be here, Stacey. Nice to see you.
Dan, this is such an important topic. I want to level set with our audience, though, to make sure that this is a good investment of their time. Can you tell me who you think needs to tune in to this conversation?
Today's conversation is critical for heads of talent and if not CHROs directly. What we see with the Great Resignation is that despite an amazing amount of effort across town halls and incentive packages and refocusing on the criticality of their employees and teams, that there's this huge opportunity they're missing, namely in the extended workforce. So this great opportunity, folks that are already working for their businesses that can create a channel for temporary to permanent hires.
And this is important information for not only the HR professionals and the operations you said, but it's also important information for the executives and the CEOs, I think, as well on this conversation, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if a CEO cares about his or her ability to prosecute their strategic objectives with a great team, absolutely the talent is critical. And so filling out that talent profile in a tough hiring market is really the opportunity.
Yeah, it's something I think everyone's talking about. So let's get right to it because the Great Resignation is far from over. However, the landscape has shifted a little bit. We do know that with inflation up and with people sort of searching for sort of the next generation of their sort of work environments that they're looking for. Can you tell us about these hidden talent pools? Where do they exist and how can professionals in the HR world and in the operation side of the business tap into them?
Yeah, it's an amazing, vast array of talent out there that companies are in general already engaging. But here's the irony, Stacy. Most companies are thinking of one channel of non-employee talent, namely staff augmentation. So your typical contingent worker brought to you by a staffing firm. And yet, as promising as that channel is for temporary to permanent hires, and we can talk about how to make it more effective, there are other channels. And so there are channels, for example, for direct sourcing, new channels for talent where you leverage your company's brand and bring in talent directly. Other channels for gig workers, professional freelancers who do some work for you as a freelancer and then decide to convert full time. What I see in general is that there are multiple channels for talent to come into your organization from the non-employee population. And most companies that I engage with are only looking at one of them.
Well, yeah, especially if you're letting someone like the vendor department sort of work with all of that and you're not handling it as an HR professional as well.
It's a little bit of an irony to me in that many HR groups say that's not our problem. And yet here's, a typical well-run staff augmentation, so typical contingent workforce program might convert 18 to 25% of that population into full-time team members. 18 to
Wow.
25%.
Yeah.
Think about that range, right? If you can get another 5, 7% out of your program from temp to perm hires, I am seeing a shift from HR saying, oh, this is maybe procurement's problem or someone else's problem, or just if you have a cost center budget, you have at it, to actively looking at as a source for talent. I want HR saying, I want to own that. I'm recognizing the strategic importance here. And I'd say there's a really bright future for new ways to engage that talent, new ways to bring them into your org.
I know one of the challenges is that it's there's a bit of a risk aversion, not just because it's a lot of extra work and because right now other organizations might own it, but also there is some concern about regulations and crossing some of those regulation boundaries. Can you maybe help us a little bit with 3 or 4 strategies that HR professionals or other leaders inside the organization can leverage to make these hires permanent in a way that works both for the workforce that they're bringing in and for their organization?
So our mental model on this market is that it starts with the worker. You need to understand the worker. We'll say internally quite a bit that you're more than your rate card, Stacy. You are more than first name, last name, pay rate. And so understanding the worker, what they're doing for you, what their skills are is a great way to start. I mentioned the multiple channels. Like I think looking at multiple channels is already a best practice for some. I spoke to a customer recently. 80% of their non-employee population is now coming to them from direct sourcing, up from zero about 3 years ago. So think about that. So that means that they used to look to managed service providers, look to staffing firms, et cetera. And now 80% of the time they bring talent into their organization. Again, this is just contingent talent or direct source talent, leveraging their own brand, curating a private talent pool from which they can then hire folks. And lastly, I think it's about collecting the right data. What is this workforce doing for you? Where are they? Yes, there are employment compliance concerns, but in the main, I think companies haven't focused on this population to the point that they can get the most effect for their broader talent strategies. And so having that right data to say, where are they? What are they doing for me? What is my workforce mix is part of what I'm seeing a real craving for.
Yeah, so it's really coming down to a bit of the data and the original source, right? Knowing what that source is and what your approach is to it. And what I heard you also say is that, we are seeing more and more organizations sort of directly hire the contingents through their own sort of process. So there is, I think, a lot of different paths that organizations can take that you just talked about. Let's talk a little bit about some of the hidden, I don't know, blind spots, I would say, right? Because I think it's one thing to say, I want to bring in my contingent workers and maybe start to look at them as a talent pool. But what are some of the things maybe that are holding both the contingent workforce or the extended workforce back from maybe wanting to join the organization or holding us back from putting a program in place?
I'm here to tell you it's a mess out there, Stacy. It is so chaotic. You cannot believe how poor the experience is for most non-employee workers when they come into an organization. We literally have healthcare customers coming to us and saying, we had physicians that couldn't get into the ER because their badge stopped working. So, it's a mess out there. I think the blind spots really come down to lack of an understanding of the work of the talent, what they're doing for you, putting forward a one size fits all provisioning strategy to say, here's essentially how we provision everyone. And it's either just designed for one category of non-employee labor, or even sometimes worse, it's taking the same on and offboarding flow for employees and trying to apply it to every type of population doing work for your business. If you look at it as a candidate experience,
Yeah.
potential for a great source of new talent, diverse talent, hard to find skills, etc., that you can easily identify ways to optimize that experience for the worker. I think it starts there.
Which it seems like it sounds so simple, but I think it is I think blind spot is the exact word we're hearing. They just overlook this audience because of their both fear of regulations, but also because they feel like it just belongs in another category. And what I'm hearing you say is that the organizations who have taken advantage of this find that it really all blends. We had mentioned a little bit about the kinds of data that you need to do this effectively. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, I know you've been in the HR tech industry for a long time. Data is a big conversation we have. What kinds of data do you capture about an extended workforce that can make this a little bit easier than what I think a lot of people are thinking about right now?
Yeah, most systems on the market capture, and I wasn't joking earlier, they capture first name, last name, rate card about a worker. And so our foundational point is we say, look, we're going to put the worker in the center of our approach and capture rich engagement data. What are they doing for you? When did they do it? Where did they do it? What skills are they bringing to the table? If they have multiple active engagements, we can support that, particularly important in healthcare and different critical industries. So, for example, we have a very large, global 100 pharmaceutical company went into production a month and a half ago. They have 34,000 workers across 100 countries. And so now they talk about the 4 Bs: buy, build, borrow, bot is sort of their talent strategy, kind of highest level. So the data that they're now looking for is really a comparison for when I bring in external labor versus employee labor, like what's the mix? right? What does my total workforce look like as far as skills, position mapping, locations, outputs, right? Performance outputs. And so I'd say it's almost just in your mind. Imagine, and I know you know this space better than anyone. All of the typical
Yeah.
employee metrics and data being captured just applied to different categories of non-employee labor. So you can have an actual lens into and visibility into your total workforce.
Yeah, that's a I think that's a fabulous sort of, reminder that data oftentimes is overlooked that we might think is just sort of extra or something that we would like to have, and how valuable it can be on the back end if we actually take the time to gather it. The number we get in our research right now is that on average organizations are capturing, if they are capturing extended workforce data at all, they're capturing it in 2 to 3 different systems across the organization. So the idea of a holistic view of all that data is, I think, really hard for organizations to sort of envision right now. But you just talked about how you could make that happen, and so I think it's very opportunistic at this point in time for people to think about it.
Well, I mean, that's right. That and and that fractured sense of the data, we think misses a real talent opportunity. Back to the opening statement, right? So tucked within one of those silos of data, there are some great folks you should be hiring that might be bringing skills or diversity into your organization, if only you knew it. And the irony is, they're already working for you. Like it's a perfect try before you buy sort of relationship. So unlocking that data, we think, is part of the opportunity that talent professionals have in front of them. It's almost like, you've got some gold in the backyard, but you never got around to digging, right? Like it's actually there
Yes.
at your fingertips.
You're so passionate about this topic. I mean, I think even every time I've talked to you about it, we've ended up on these wild conversations about how many opportunities organizations are missing out on, or what are some of the great stories around when they do take advantage of it, how they save themselves not only money but time and the ability to sort of, I think, broaden their view of talent. Utmost is your baby, right? You're a co-founder. It is an important project for you. Can you tell me a little bit about how it came about? I mean, I think the name is interesting in and of itself. Maybe just a little conversation about that for our audience, because I think that might lend to people understanding how you feel about this industry.
I appreciate the opportunity. In my alma mater, I saw a recurring pattern where a larger and larger percentage of the population was fitting into what traditionally would be a contingent or a non-employee category, and there was great dissatisfaction with the products on the market. And as I investigated the market, I said, man, the systems on place, products like SAP Fieldglass, Beeline, vendor management systems as a category, there were 36 of them at the time, and all of them were underserving the market opportunity. At the same time, you have a massive shift in how work's getting done. That we're probably sitting at an inflection point in the next 2 years. The majority of the global working population will in fact be non-employed,
Yeah.
as opposed to employee, and that's a secular shift over the last 20 years. My thought with my co-founders was, this is a real mistake. This is a mistake. No one should be invisible. Half the workforce should not be invisible. Everyone should have a name. Everyone should be understood. Everyone is bringing value to the table. And that, if anything, what I see happening is that the boundaries of working relationships are becoming more fluid, where you'll be a contractor today, you'll be an employee tomorrow, you might do a side hustle even at the same time as a gig worker or freelancer. And so we named the company Utmost because we thought it captured this strategic opportunity, doing your most as an individual, doing the most with your total workforce, doing your utmost.
Yeah.
And so it's an aspirational term, both the individual as a company, and it's great fun. I mean, I will say we're really grateful to be serving our customers and getting out there, because if anything, COVID and the acceleration related to truly remote, hybrid, global, it's putting pressure on companies to think about how they think about their workforce. Our working models are going to be shifting to mobilizing talent, bringing people in, getting work done, with a broad array of talent, independent of, are they W-2 or not? You'll care less in the future. You'll just want to get the work done as efficiently as possible.
We saw in our data this year that over 50% of organizations were planning on increasing their extended labor workforce, whatever that was within their existing organization. So I think you are right at the center of, as you said, change that is happening in, I think, here in the United States, but globally as well. We're seeing it all over the world. European is actually a little farther ahead of us in this, and so it always, is absolutely exciting to me when we start to sort of merge the world around sort of thinking about workforces. Our data shows that about 35% of organizations still have no system in place for managing an extended workforce. So we're talking a lot about multiple systems and how people bring it together and how they can think about it broadly. But if you're working off the spreadsheets right now, besides missing out on the talent pool, what other risks? I mean, there's real risks in managing an extended workforce in an spreadsheet environment. Can you maybe share a little bit of that? Because you've had a lot of customers who came to you with nothing in place previously, right?
The statistic that always surprises me is that less than 10% of the extended workforce, so this is all categories of non-employee labor,
Yeah.
contingent workers, contractors, gig workers, service-based contracts, BPO, you name it, are less than 10% are captured in any system of record. A one-off. This is essentially every customer we see. The pharmaceutical company I mentioned earlier, 34,000 is the population, 4,000 were captured in a VMS, right? We have one customer that had 500 seats in a VMS, elected almost for 20,000 seats. That's the high water mark as far as the ratio of what wasn't being captured. What the implication is, beyond just the systems headaches, you've got a SharePoint database over here, a spreadsheet over there, homegrown system over there. Frequently, it's by geography. So, a different system in Thailand versus India versus EMEA, et cetera.
Yeah.
But this is one of the reasons it's so bad out there. I mean, I've talked to CTOs from banks who had hearings in front of the SEC because they were trying to explain why a contractor 6 months after the end of their contract still had access to sensitive financial data for a publicly held financial institution. The native implications are profound. Intellectually, we think as there are HR systems of record for employees, that there should be a system of record for non-employees, and that there's value in them being different because of compliance concerns. You don't want the data in the same place in many cases. And ultimately, it comes down to the life cycle. We have one client, this is, again, our high watermark, a large, they're a global medical device company, well-known brand. They have 15 different categories of labor, 5. One of them is employee. 14 are non-employee. And
Wow.
we have the ability to offer different life cycles for each of those different categories of labor. If the folks listening to this are like other clients we're serving, it's not a question of if they're facing pain, it's just a question of how much, right, across these different geographies, different pools of labor.
I can't tell you the last time I talked to a professional who didn't say that, this was an area they wanted to improve. Now, whether they're going to get around to it, whether they're going to be able to fit it into their time frame, that's, I think, the conversation that a lot of them have with us. But what we're saying is, look, you're dealing with the talent crunch. You're dealing with the issues of remote workers now. You're dealing with the fact that you do have multiple types of workforces, and it's time to start thinking more broadly about it. And as always, this has been a great conversation. I have one final question.
I will say, sorry to interrupt, Stacey.
Nope.
You mentioned trends in Europe, and it's a global trend. It
Yeah.
certainly is. I'd say one thing we're seeing in Europe in particular is, and I'd say in forward-looking organizations in the US, is a pattern where the head of people operations will have external labor as one of their part of their scope. We very much see this trend in Europe where we're starting to see VPs of total workforce, like that kind of level, which is interesting because I think we're starting to see that elevate, and I think that's a trend we're going to continue. If you're sitting there as a chief people officer, your org structure might benefit from looking at some of these best practices out there.
One of the things that we know across the board, why we're seeing a lot of it being picked up in the European environments as well, but also in other international environments, is your commentary about the fact that, if someone's just a number and a badge and a rate, right? And we're trying to build a brand, and we're trying to ensure that we are providing the best, most ethical approach to working with our workforce. It's got to be everybody. It can't just be the people who are in our HRMS environment or in our employee population. So I think this is not just a movement about sort of what HR should own. It's also a movement about what we need to think about when we're talking about our entire workforce. So I love the fact that you're seeing that. I think we need more of it in the conversation. One last question. How does an HR leader who wants to make the move and to tap into the extended workforce and take ownership of the contingent workforce conversation, what do they do to move forward? What is their first step in your mind?
I'm seeing a growing pool of experts. I'd put you in this camp, that are able to start to talk about this, right? Like this is a blind spot for HR, and I love some of your naming. HR, we have a problem. HR, next move, but I am seeing more interest in the space. There are traditional places that are sort of focused on contingent workforce, external labor, like staffing industry analysts and kind of credible research organizations, ardent partners. But I'm seeing also Sapient Insights. I'm seeing Deloitte's building a practice. We work heavily with Cognizant, Collaborative Solutions, and others where they're able to offer expertise to help you with total workforce planning. As you, as a sort of chief people officer, head of talent, think about your digital transformation. How are you going to do that digital transformation if a third of your workforce isn't in the picture? I'm always happy to talk to people. If we can't be helpful, we can probably connect with the folks that are.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we forget that, some of the people that we're working with every day, have venues into more expertise often than we remember, right? I love the call out for the HR strategist and the organizations. And I think also, your comment that sometimes the first step is just asking for help and looking around and to see who you can get that help from. Dan, thank you for making the time to be here today. It's such a pleasure to have you. We appreciate your insight and your expertise.
Great to see you, Stacey. Always a pleasure.
If you want to explore more on how your organization can discover these hidden gems and high performers and turn them into full-time hires, head over to utmost.co and check out their blog. Follow them on LinkedIn at Utmost Software, on Twitter at Utmost HQ, and be sure to tune in to their podcast, Contingent Workforce Radio, on Spotify and Apple. And I really want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. Lots of opportunity to learn about this topic, and hopefully it'll leave you with more questions that you're willing to ask about your workforce in the next phase of your workforce planning efforts.